Hello everyone, this is Venus Brown. Today I will be doing a reaction video and a little bit of discussion for a House of Dragon What to Expect video that was done with the cast members by Entertainment Weekly. So I will start out just with the reaction to the video, and then every now and then I will pause the video and then discuss whatever it is that I need to discuss about it. The actual title of this video is House of Dragon on What to Expect in Game of Thrones Prequel, Entertainment Weekly. Okay, so and I will post a link of that in my description. I also talk a little bit about, I think it's Talking Thrones. Talking Thrones had a video on right after this one that I decided to go ahead and watch, and I really like Talking Thrones. They have been doing this for a while longer, and they and I think they do a pretty decent job. So if you really want some information and you want it laid out in a decent manner, I definitely recommend Talking Thrones, and I will put their link in there along with the link to this video so that anybody who wants to can go and look that up later. Let's begin. All right, everybody. So I'm going to start this video.
They're bonkers, aren't they?
They are bonkers.
They're absolutely mad, the Targaryens. They're a right old bunch.
And emotional. They're so emotional. And they can't talk to each other. Yeah.
They're quite a cross family, deep down.
They are.
I think they need a great deal of therapy.
They do. They
Group
do.
therapy.
Yeah. Family therapy.
Family therapy.
So yeah, the Targaryens, and keep in mind the Targaryens in this show are not going to be the same Targaryens as what you see in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones will be a distinctly different show than what this is. Also keep in mind Game of Thrones takes place generations after this. I think it's like 200 years, at least to start out. And the Targaryen family is something special. They're something special. And I think also keep in mind, according to the books, the Targaryens originally come to Westeros from Valyria. They leave Valyria, they come to Westeros, and the king at the time comes to Westeros, takes over. I guess Westeros at the time was just like hundreds of different little areas that were kind of ruled by their own rulers, and so it was just this huge patchwork of all kinds of stuff, and you have battles going on all the time between the different rulers and the different kingdoms. Literally comes over to this other country and starts waging war on them and takes them over until they all gradually, almost all of them, agree to become part of his kingdom and swear loyalty to him as a king. But that did not go over as just like, oh yeah, we're all going to bend down and we're all going to swear loyalty to you without you trying. He had to actually work at it. Some of the stuff that you see in Game of Thrones with people fighting and battling for the throne, for power, all of that, the idea of the Game of Thrones did not necessarily start from Game of Thrones. That started before that, and I think some of that it really starts to show in this Fire and Blood, I believe. I think a lot of that starts with this generation that is going to be presented in the House of Dragons, and what we see in Game of Thrones is very different, but it's like all of that has gotten worse and it's festered and it's much more fighting. It's much more of a Game of Thrones. But I do think that where we see that start to come about is the beginning of House of Dragons, the beginning of Fire and Blood.
That make Rhaenyra a character who interests me, at least. She is both female and never expects to be heir. That's never on the table, and everything falls apart the moment that she receives the inheritance that everyone looks for. And the other thing is she's someone who I think is at odds with her gender as a result of the position she finds herself in. Yeah, I suppose I'm interested in like all gender questions, so yeah, you have someone whose womanhood is at odds with the role that they've been awarded.
I think they can find out what they want to find out on the internet about Daemon Targaryen. It's there for all to see. And it's just my take on it, really. He's a slightly sort of different creature to most of them, I think.
Okay, so let's see. Let's first start talking about Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is actually, I believe, the second generation female that should end up in a position of power over the kingdom, and does not, because she's female. I think Rhaenys is the first female that ends up in that position in Westeros, where she should be becoming the queen. She should be becoming the person with control over the realm, and that doesn't end up happening. And so this whole question of gender, it's a big thing with Westeros, especially because of the religious sects there. The people of the new religion see a lot of the Targaryen traditions as being abominable. They consider them to be terrible, and so they squelch that, and in order to remain in power and have power over the kingdom without being at constant war with the religious sects, they take a stance of, we're going to mute some of these traditions. We're going to stop following some of these traditions. And one of the traditions that falls by the wayside is females being a normal part of a position of power. It's the root of all the horrible crap that happens in Fire and Blood. So, oh yeah, and Daemon. Okay, so Daemon is presented in the books as quite the player. He likes his women, I think men too. He is not necessarily the most responsible person. He's a good fighter, but not necessarily somebody that you want to have full control over the realm. So, and I believe he's part of that whole thing.
Alicent starts off as Rhaenyra's best friend and daughter to the hand of the king, and she is quite an anxious rule follower in comparison to how free and mischievous Rhaenyra is.
I play Otto Hightower, Alicent's father. He's the hand of the king. He's an astute, high-functioning political creature, but he struggles with some of the decisions he is forced to make.
Hands to the king. We've seen in Game of Thrones how they have to deal with all these awful things, and with the freaking divisions of the kingdom, they have to deal with making really awful decisions and really hard decisions. And I don't remember a lot about the hand from the book, just bits and pieces, but I do remember that he goes through a considerable amount of mess.
So Rhaenys technically is in line to the throne when the time comes for the old king to pass on, and because she is a woman, she is outvoted by 20 to 1 by those fools in
So this is Rhaenys, and this is who I was talking about, the first generation female that gets shot down. And from what I recall in the books, her father really wanted her to be in charge. What ends up happening is, because of the way that the kingdom is, because of the way these religious sects are, because of that, I think the king decides, we're going to convene this council. Okay, and it's not a council like we think of here, where you have like a group of people together of leaders or representatives or whatever that make the decision for everybody in the kingdom. From what I recall, this council was huge. This was like, oh, I'm going to invite everybody in the kingdom. And so, and of course not everybody can come, but it ends up being like the largest amount of people from the kingdom ever convening in one spot at one time. They put all these people together to make this decision about who's going to be the next ruler of Westeros. And Rhaenys is very handily voted down because they think that men should be in power. And I think honestly, if the Targaryens had just stuck to their guns and, I don't know, put some of the religious people in their place from the beginning, yes, it would have caused strife, it would have caused war, but I think it would have been a lot less war than what ends up happening. And I think a lot of this stuff could have been avoided. Women, if you put them in power, may become a threat to men, and they don't like that. But I just think it would have just been so much better if the Targaryens had stuck to their guns and said, no, she is the next person in line. She is going to rule over the realm, and you are going to deal with it. And if we have to go to war over it, we have to go to war over it. But I just feel like it would have saved some grief.
in charge at the time.
I play Lord Corlys Velaryon, who is the head of the Velaryon house, which is he would say, the oldest house in Westeros. That his family came to Westeros before the Targaryens. Lord Corlys is the only one who doesn't ride a dragon. His whole family do. He's married to a dragon rider, and his children are dragon riders.
So, as he said, the Velaryons are considered to be the oldest family in Westeros. And one of the difference, so both Targaryens and the Velaryons came from Valyria. They originated from Valyria. And they both have their own certain power and authority. The Targaryens have the dragons command power over the skies, whereas the Velaryons are considered to command power over the oceans and seas. So that is the difference. Even though they come from the same place, they have similar bloodlines. They are, they're like, they ride ships. They know the ocean. They are powerful in that way, whereas the Targaryens know the dragons and they know how to ride dragons, and so they command the skies.
Of both of these shows is the pursuit of power. I think the difference with this show is that it's slightly more intimate. Politics and politicking play a greater role, I think, in this.
Here we are only at the start. It feels like this is really intense and more focusing with this one crazy family.
I'll kind of touch on some of the comparisons for the book and the show, and then comparisons of the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons afterwards. So I think one of the things they'll talk about a little bit later like how the different cast members decide that they are going to become like that character, and whether they actually use the original source material from the books in order to learn their character, or whether they decide to just use the scripts that they're given and to avoid the books. And then there's also the debate on whether you use the material from Game of Thrones to try to decide how you're going to approach a certain character, or approach how somebody is played. Are they going to actually do that in order to get a better understanding of of the realm and the world and the characters that we already know and love or hate, and the source material that's already out there? Or are they going to try to kind of create their own character based on what they learn from the script and whatever the producers and directors tell them? And each cast member is going to have their own approach to that. And I've heard this from several other actors in other shows. I'm no actor, but I can definitely see the appeal to acting.
It's about dragons. Well, there's lots of dragons in it. When we're sort of filming the dragons on set, we have this big buck, which is a bit like a bucking bronco, and it moves around and it's mechanical, and they, fire loads of wind in your face, and then they add big, beautiful dragons on top of that in post-production.
So I was quite cross, I think, when I had to go and do my buck work, just by chance. And
Just because
actually,
you were that morning
I just
cross?
was, yeah, and
Oh, good.
I didn't fancy it maybe, and then it turns out it's sort of irresistible. It's like going to IKEA and having to try the taps in the kitchens.
It's very
you
windy
can't-
as well. The wind's quite exciting, isn't
It
it?
is. It's like when you stick your head out of the car and you can't catch a breath.
Yes.
Okay, so when I heard her say this, gosh, until she started talking about IKEA, it reminded me of the feeling like when you go rappelling or parachuting out of a helicopter. I haven't been parachuting out of a helicopter, but I have been rappelling, and it is so exhilarating. But it reminds me of that feeling. So they the buck work they're talking about is getting on these things that they make to kind of, it's not to look anything like the dragon, but it's to reflect the movements that need to be made for the dragon and the rider when they're riding the dragons. And and that's what I thought of is when I went rappelling. I had so much fun. It was so exhilarating. And that's what this reminded me of when she was talking about her, like, starting out. She's in a bad mood. She's not really feeling it. She's not in, she doesn't think that this is going to be all that it's cracked up to be. And so she comes in a bad mood, but then she does it and it's like tons of fun. That definitely reminded me of that. And yeah. And I'll say about the dragons also, because I might as well just get it done and over with. The dragons in Game of Thrones, by the point of Game of Thrones, it's several generations after, and the dragons have all but died off. The only dragons that are left are actually the eggs, and 3 eggs that people just assume are dead, that they can never hatch. But well, they find out that's wrong, and we do have the 3 eggs that do end up hatching, and they have 3 dragons at least, but no more dragons after that in Game of Thrones. Whereas in House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood, there are a lot of dragons. This is like the realm of the dragons. So dragons are a normal part of things there at that time. unfortunately, because of what happens in House of the Dragon, in Fire and Blood, with this family, within probably 2 or 3 generations, the disagreements with who is ruling the kingdom when the king before dies and they have to get a new king or queen, that whole thing causes a split, not just between different groups in the kingdom, that causes a split in the family. So some of the family members are on the side of Rhaenyra and some of the family members are on the other side. Because of the split that happens at that time between the brother, I think it was the brother and sister, that causes this whole division between different members of the family, and they start fighting each other. They use the dragons to fight each other. And of course, each battle, more people and more dragons are getting killed off until, and I don't know how far they're going to go on House of the Dragon, but in the book, by the end of all of this fighting, the dragons have almost been completely killed off. There's almost none of them left. So that's how you get to this point where House of the Dragon has all these dragons at the beginning of it. But by the time you get to Game of Thrones, a couple hundred years later, the dragons have been dead for a couple hundred years. So just keep that in mind. I don't know how far into it they will go. I don't know how many seasons we will be allowed to have. But if it goes very far into the books, then by the time House of the Dragon is over, it should be to a position to where there are very few or almost no dragons left, which to me was very, very sad. But it does give you that information on what happened. How did this happen?
Giddy making.
Rhaenys' dragon is called Meleys, and they are very, very close. Almost like Meleys is a part of Rhaenys and Rhaenys is a part of Meleys. They're very, very attached.
I think kind of Daemon and Craxes are sort of one entity, really. They're one spirits. They're sort of avatars of one another. They're both just grumpy and moody. So I do think there's a kind of weird symbiotic sort of molecular thing that goes on.
So this is kind of cool. I do like that. I think when I went through the books, I don't know, I didn't feel that kind of connection where you really had a good understanding of the relationship between the dragon and their rider, but it does sound like I think this is something I will look forward to, is with video, that ability to really see the relationship, to get a broader picture of that relationship between the dragon and their rider. I think that'll be kind of cool.
Oh my god, the wigs!
It's a number to get into them and then get out of them.
I'm lucky. I'm one of the few characters that doesn't wear a wig.
Although you did say this morning you wish you did have one.
I did. This morning I wanted to wear a wig because it means you get to spend more time in makeup, chatting. And I'm always a happier man when I leave the makeup trailer than when I enter it. It's a good way to start your day.
I love wearing a wig, it turns out, which
Do you?
I do actually.
I see you.
It's just so transformative. It's an air look. Like I arrive at work, I don't have to come as the person.
Yeah, or
and then
it's
I have
like
an hour in
poetry,
like
whichever way you look at it. It's
Right.
one of
okay, that's in purgatory.
No, I'm not.
I'm in a
I know
crucible
what you
of
mean, though.
transformation.
Yes, no, no, but it sort of does a lot of the work for you, doesn't it?
It does. It changes.
It's like a mask.
It does. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It changes sort of everything.
It does. It does.
So, I like the discussion of the wigs, and I think I've heard similar discussions with the cast members from Versailles. Alexander Vlahos, he definitely talked about like getting to pick between these multiple types of wigs, because all the men in most of the men in Versailles have very long hair, and so they have these long glamorous wigs that they wear to impart that character, and it's interesting. But I have sensitivity issues, so having like things like wigs that would be way too itchy for me and way too hot, like wearing earbuds irritates my ears. Putting headphones on for too long, that really, it's like heats up too much, and it starts to give me headaches and irritates me too. So yeah, because of like these skin sensitivities, I just have these sensitivity issues for whatever reason, and it makes it so that, having stuff on my head or on my ears, having makeup on, all are very uncomfortable to me, so I try to avoid that. I do love to do cosplays with my kids and to dress up for Halloween with my kids and everything, but I will make a point to choose characters and costumes that do not require masks, that do not require wigs, and that do not require real cumbersome costumes. I need something that is fairly comfortable for me to wear, for the time that I'm going to have to wear it. And so I can't imagine having to like go through all the hair and makeup of any of the actors that in any of the movies that they have to go through. But especially if it's like a lot. If it's like a lot and if it's very different, but I definitely understand what they're saying about it being transformative, and that like it's kind of nice to be able to take this little break from yourself, take this role that you play as yourself, and just be presented as this other completely different person or character or creature. That is fun. I just have to do it in a comfortable way. But
that's being flown around, and you can just see the despair from the hair and makeup team.
I couldn't imagine.
Received the signed
I think
copy
he's supposed to
of
be the
George R. R.
king.
Martin's Fire and Blood. I read a bit. I did. I did.
What we did was, what I did anyway, for the parts of the book, because it's a huge book.
So this
and
is the
started
part
to
I was
skim down,
talking
and I
about
thought,
where they
actually,
talk
no,
about the
If
books.
it's not in the script, it's not there. I don't need it. So I'll probably read it this summer.
I was very aware of it because, it was very difficult not to be aware of it, but I hadn't actually seen it.
I hadn't watched the series before I auditioned, but then once I got the job and started watching Game of Thrones, I realised that I had been auditioning with Cersei's scenes, but I was so happy I hadn't watched it, because I would have just mimicked absolutely everything that she had done. But, people are going to compare regardless to kings and queens and various other archetypes in the show.
My method has been to not think about it, and I've got very good at repression.
It's such a healthy shoot, isn't it?
No, but it's worked so well for me. I would really recommend it to, honestly, anyone else. Just don't think about it, and it ceases to be an issue.
Yeah.
No, I am aware that at some point it's going to come up, but for
Nothing
now...
we can do, though.
No.
Nothing we can do, and that show was its own entity. It was a cultural phenomenon in many ways, and it was its own independent thing, and this is a new independent thing. And it's a different story with different actors, with sort of different people making it, with the same ambitions, but it will be different.
Yeah, if we try to go in and make Game of Thrones Mark II, I think everyone will be very horribly disappointed. I also think you couldn't make Game of Thrones now. I think we're in a different climate, it's a different time.
Based on the bit that I've read from that book, I think what Ryan and Miguel have done, and all the writers and so forth, is they've created a credible tale from beginning to end that is consistent. Of course, there will be those fanboys and girls who will watch it and not be happy and say, well, this should have been that and this should have been that. I've had a bit of that, but you can't please everybody.
I think possibly for the producers and the creators, there's a pressure, which is, understandable, you know, and palpable. But for us as actors, it's like any other job. You know, you go in and you do the work, and you do it to the best of your abilities.
And completely forget that it's ever going to be seen on screens.
But obviously, the way we're telling it is the bit we'd like to keep secret, and the sort of the elements of it, the bits of the story that we're focusing on, and the characters' perspective, because that's what's sort of different from the book, isn't it? It's the perspective of our show is slightly different.
I mean, there's a really lovely thing, right, in terms of any relationship between this show and Game of Thrones in the future, is I think some of the kind of historic events that we hear about in Thrones, maybe a record gets set straight in House of the Dragon.
So yeah, do keep in mind that they are very separate things. So don't expect House of the Dragons to be the next Game of Thrones. He was so right about, you know, the whole fanboys and fangirls who like get all up in the air about things not being like they think they should be, or not being close enough to the source material and stuff like that. You know, you can't please everyone. But definitely don't expect House of the Dragon to be the next Game of Thrones. They're not the same thing. And if you approach them wanting them to be the same thing, I think you're going to be very disappointed. So please just remember it's a separate show of generations before. You know, approach it that way. And I have heard that they do plan to kind of stick to the book, but they're not going to completely, so don't expect it to be like everything sticking straight to the source material, because my understanding is that it's not all going to be strictly stuck to the source material. But I think they did say that they managed to try to hire some of the people in charge of the writing and everything that do know the source material, and do plan to kind of make sure that it's in keeping with the source material, so that they don't stray off too crazy and don't end up with some of the disappointments that we had at the end of Game of Thrones. But I'm looking forward to it either way. I think this is going to be exciting. And here I'll let this play a little bit more. So this is just images of it looks like Entertainment Magazine is what it looks like. And I don't know if those are actual images that they put on their magazine, but that's definitely what it looks like, which I think are kind of cool. It says House Targaryen, Entertainment back in the game, House of the Dragon. All right, so that's the video, my reaction. I am really excited for this. It's been a long time since Game of Thrones ended, and I've kept a healthy amount of skepticism about when anything was going to happen and what was going to happen, and I still hold a healthy amount of skepticism, so I know House of the Dragons is coming on very soon. Good God. And I will be doing reaction recaps for the show when it comes on. I am very excited. If you are worried about spoilers, then you really should watch the shows before you watch my reactions, because I do give spoilers. Any reactions I do, I'm going to give spoilers. I might not talk about the whole season or whatever, but most likely I will talk a little bit about the most recent episode, and I will definitely give spoilers away about what happens in that episode. So just keep that in mind. And when I do reactions to teaser trailers and videos like this, I definitely will give spoilers. So if you don't like spoilers, then I recommend you watch the stuff first. It was lovely to see everyone. I hope to see you again. If you liked this, if you want to see my reaction videos to House of the Dragon when it comes on, if you want to see my reaction videos to Handmaid's Tale or to Dairy Girls, go ahead, click the subscribe button and click the little bell that will notify you when I have new content out. And if you don't, then don't worry about it. You are in charge of you. You make your own decisions. You decide if you really like something, if you want to subscribe to it, if you want notifications, or if you really don't care. And I will see you next time I see you, or I won't. Bye.